Today's episode is part one of a brand new series I'm calling Why Jesus? Why Jesus? Why believe in Jesus? Why follow Jesus? Why accept the Bible as truth? These are all valid questions that us Christians need to prepare how to answer. There's going to be a lot of non-believers coming at us with these type of questions, but how can we educate them? What if a non-believer does not want to accept anything Bible? Is there any outside sources outside of the Bible that we can use to educate this non-believer? Well, there is. In today's video, we're going to talk about some interesting stuff outside of the Bible that mentions Jesus. So my name is Rob, and I welcome you to Sunny Over Shady. Alrighty, so let me just put this disclaimer out there first. If you're ever trying to reach somebody, it's always best to go to the Bible first. This is the very best source that you can use to help someone understand Jesus. If this is not enough, it's all good because it says that love is patient. So we're going to be patient with this person. We're still going to love them the same way we love everyone else. There's actually outside sources that can help the case here. So if they don't want to go here first, it's all good. We can still pull from other sources to help this person out. So I'm just going to put that disclaimer out there first. Alright, so let's get into the first topic here. Now, the first topic is non-Christian historians. Now, these are guys that wrote about Jesus, they acknowledge his existence, and they acknowledge what he was known for. So, the first person that I'm going to talk about here is Phlegon. Now, Phlegon is a 2nd century Greek writer that was quoted by other writers after him as well. What he mentioned about Jesus is very interesting. So, he says that Jesus had knowledge of future events, and the results corresponded with his predictions, meaning Jesus had some kind of prophetic gift. Whatever he said actually did end up coming true. So he did write about that. And he also mentioned another interesting fact about Jesus. He said Jesus, after he arose from death, he showed the marks of his punishment, and he showed how his hands were pierced by nails. So isn't that pretty interesting what we find out about Jesus? We find out about his crucifixion. We find about his prophetic gift. And we find out that he had followers that he showed his punishment of the pierced nails. So all this corresponds with the Bible. And this is outside of the Bible. So it's just another interesting fact here. And this is just the first guy. Alright, so the second non-Christian historian that we're going to talk about here is a man named Pliny the Younger, who also lived in the 2nd century. Pliny the Younger was a Roman author and an administrator who his job was to write about the public life and the private life of the Roman Empire in its heyday. So it's interesting what we find out about his writings. From his writings, he mentions Christianity, and he talks about Christians. What he says is Christians, they used to gather on a certain day at a certain time, and they would sing hymns to Christ as if he were a god. And they bound themselves by solemn oaths, saying that they're not going to partake in any wicked deeds, they're not going to partake in any fraud or theft or adultery, any of that stuff. So it's interesting that we find out things about Christianity back in the day that we still have in the Bible today. Sorry, that's my dog. But what we see here is Christianity did exist, and they did worship Jesus as if he were a god, and Jesus, to this day, we still worship him as a god, and we sing songs to Jesus, and we still live by those type of standards. It's pretty cool, right? Okay, so the third non-Christian historian that we're going to talk about here is Josephus. Flavius Josephus. Now, he was born in Jerusalem in the 1st century, and he was also a military leader. And what he mentions about Jesus is very, very interesting. He says, "Now lived Jesus, a wise man, and a worker of amazing deeds, and a teacher of people who gladly accept the truth. Jesus was able to win over many Greeks and many Jews. And Pilate, when he heard of him, accused him with the leading men and condemned him to the cross." He condemned Jesus to the cross. And he also mentions that Christians, they get their name from Jesus, and to this day the tribe of Christians is still around and they have not disappeared. So very, very interesting stuff about Jesus here. And it also matches up what the Bible says. So first thing, Jesus lived. He said Jesus lived. Jesus was a wise man, a worker of amazing deeds, probably the miracles he was doing, because that's how his fame grew, by the miracles he was performing. A teacher of people who gladly accept the truth. Hey, I accept the truth. I'm cool with it. He said that Pilate condemned him to the cross. In the Bible, it does mention that Pontius Pilate was the one who condemned Jesus to the cross. And he says Christians are, the tribe of Christians are around to this day and have not disappeared. Obviously, I'm making this YouTube video, so we are obviously still around. So pretty cool, interesting facts about Jesus that's not in the Bible, but outside of the Bible by Josephus. Thanks, Josephus. Okay, so the fourth non-Christian historian we're going to talk about here is a man named Thallus. Now, Thallus was a first century writer that wrote about some very, very interesting details about the crucifixion of Jesus. Now, in his writings, he does say that there was a darkness over the whole land and there was an earthquake at the time Jesus was crucified on the cross. But he says that in his writings that it wasn't a supernatural occurrence. God didn't step in and then put darkness over the land, and God didn't come in and make the earthquake. He just said it was just natural causes. It was just a random coincidence, and it was an eclipse of the sun that day. But us Christians, we should look at Thallus's writings and say, you know what? He's not talking about the crucifixion as if it was some kind of myth or something like that. He's trying to have rebuttal for what happened. He's not giving the supernatural causes. We know from the Bible, in Mark, it says that a darkness took over the whole land when Jesus was on the cross. And after Jesus died on the cross, when he took his last breath, there was an earthquake around the whole land. And even somebody looked up at Jesus dead on the cross and they said, wow, he was really the Son of God. So us Christians should look at Thallus's writings and really, really say, hey, you know what? This is really starting to confirm that Jesus really did exist. So it's pretty cool stuff that we're finding out here. Okay, so the fifth non-Christian historian here is Tacitus, Cornelius Tacitus. He was a first century Roman historian and a senator. And he actually writes about how the Roman Emperor Nero hated Christians at the time, and he blamed them for the fires in Rome. So that's pretty interesting as well. But what he says here is, at the time, the people around in that time, they hated Christians. And they said that they named them Christians because they got their origin from Christ, from this man named Christ who actually died on the cross under Pontius Pilate. And that Nero tortured the Christians, that he loved to torture the Christians at the time, and somehow, some way, the Christians spread all over the world and their fame became popular to this day. So a couple of interesting facts here is, once again, we see that Jesus existed. Jesus had followers. Jesus died on the cross under Pontius Pilate, which is also in the Bible, mentions Pontius Pilate. And then, obviously, the Emperor Nero is a real person at the time, so we can kind of go back and fact check, did he exist? Okay, he existed. Did he hate Christians at the time? Yes, he did hate Christians. Why? Because they followed this man Christ, and their fame grew, to this very day. And here I am on this YouTube video talking to you guys about Jesus. So obviously this stuff is still around, and all these sources that we're talking about, once again, outside of the Bible, matches up with what the Bible says. So very interesting facts here again. Okay, there it is. All those outside sources from people that wrote about Jesus in their times. So what can we learn and what can we gather from here? So looking at all the stuff that's outside of the Bible, we can actually learn that Jesus did live. He did die on the cross. He was crucified on the cross under Pontius Pilate. He did have followers. His followers were tortured and hated, and they spread across the world. We can find out that Jesus did work amazing deeds and miracles. He did show his hands that were pierced after he arose from the dead. And he had prophetic gifts. He knew the future. He predicted the future. And there actually was an earthquake and darkness all around when he was crucified on the cross. All these things that are in the Bible, but we hear about all this stuff outside of the Bible. So isn't that interesting? So I hope you guys learned a whole lot of stuff. Whatever you learned today, go out there and use it. Start applying it to friends, family, strangers. Make sure you do like the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Tell other people to subscribe to the channel. That helps to spread the news. Share the video to as many people as you possibly can. But for now, be prepared for part 2. Got a whole lot of more stuff to say in that video. But I hope you guys have a very blessed day. And remember, keep it sunny over shady.